Hi, this is FIDE master Viktor Neustroyev. Chess players usually value a bishop more than a knight because of its long reach. The bishop can move from one flank to another in just one move, when the knight maneuver requires two or more moves. Many coaches scold their students for exchanging a bishop for a knight. However, sometimes knights are better than bishops. But how to define if the bishop is good and we should keep it by the end of the game or exchange for a knight immediately? There are some reference points to identify which piece is better in this concrete situation, and I'm going to explain them in this short video. Okay, this is FIDE master Viktor Neustroyev and bishop versus knight, which is better? FIDE master explains. First of all, I want you to understand that bishops are better in open positions, when there are several files open or semi-open and no barriers for the bishops, while the knights are better in closed positions because of their ability to maneuver and occupy certain squares that are unavailable for the bishops. However, if in the opening or the middle game you consider your bishop to be approximately equal to the enemy knight, you'd better keep the bishop. Later, when the game passes into the endgame, your bishop may become more helpful than the enemy knight. Okay, now let me illustrate in which concrete cases the knight is better than the bishop. First, when the knight is in the center and cannot be chased away. For example, like it happened in this game. Black continued with knight b6, and white decided to exchange their bishop for a knight, but then occupied the d5 square, queen d8. There are two weaknesses in black's position, but white decided not to capture the bishop on e7. They wanted to continue the attack. f4. Here, queen joins the attack. Queen d7. Queen f5, a simple tactical streak, so this queen cannot be attacked. In this case, knight takes e7 is a fork, and white gains the material. Rook cd8 was played, but now white focuses on the other weakness, on a6. Queen a7, rook c3, trying to enter the enemy camp. g6, queen goes g4, queen d7, offering exchange, but because of white's attack, white shouldn't exchange the queens. Queen f3, queen e6, rook c7, the bishop is in trouble, the only way is to protect it with the rook. Knight f4, queen goes to the center, and later the queen finds the only square on h8. Well, g7 was another possibility. a3, prophylaxis, and black decides to open up the position on h6. They had no other choice, otherwise they would just lose the game. So g takes h6, queen takes h6, and white now opens the king with this move. Now the bishop gets more active. Bishop comes to g5, but the position is still winning. H takes g6. The knight is not hanging because of a strong counter-attack on the enemy king, so f takes g6, queen comes to b3, threatening with a discovered attack on this diagonal. Later in the game it was played rook to f4, so rook finally captures the knight, but actually after rook e5 the game is over. For example, king moves, it's just rook e8, and then queen joins the attack and delivers a checkmate, like that. So what you may learn from this game? The knight on d5 was much better than the bishop, and because of this knight, white was able to succeed in this kingside attack. Now, the second case. The knight is better in a completely closed position, or when the bishop is restricted. Here, the bishop on b1 is restricted. And black continues with knight a3, delivering a fork. If white moves one of his rooks, he just loses the exchange. That's why rook captures c5, knight takes d1. The knight got activated, but the bishop is still in trouble, it's quite basic. Rook c6, for example, attacking here, but knight c3. So the bishop is hanging. The only square it can move is this. However, then check on e2 and the fork. They cannot capture the pawn. They have to retreat with their rook. Then rook d6, and after this move, you can, for example, retreat. Or, if you want, after this move, you can just take there, rook takes, continue with rook d5, and successfully defeat your opponent in the endgame with extra pawn. Now, the plan here is to join the king to the center, play e5, rook d3, and then get the king to the center. So in this position, the bishop was restricted and can't do much, but also became the object of the attack. That's why the knight was better than the bishop. The knight is better in the endgame when pawns are located only on one flank. For example, in this position, white has the knight on c3, the bishop is quite active, but in fact is not doing much. The knight is able to cover the squares the bishop can use to attack the pawn on g4. Well, it's white to move, and if white decides to play knight d5, this knight will be pinned, and the game is likely to end in a draw in such a case. However, white find the better move. First, they play this, and then, regardless of where black plays with their bishop, for example, d3, or maybe b3, they can find a move to attack the pawn on f6. In case of bishop b3, it's knight e4 and the pawn is lost. In case of bishop d3, it's knight d5. So here, actually, the bishop's ability to move from one flank to the other flank is not helpful. It's better to have a knight that can cover certain squares and create an attack on the pawns located on white or dark squares. Together with the queen, a knight is usually better than a bishop and a queen. For example, like it was in this game played by Vishay Anand. Here, the knight is quite active. In the center, the bishop is also restricted, but together with queen and knight, white was able to create more attacking combinations to the enemy king. So what happened in the game? Bishop e7, king g2, a prophylaxis, king g7, and now white tries to enter the enemy camp using light squares. So queen b3, queen c7, queen b5, king f7, queen c6. Because if now they decide to take and then stop the pawn with this move, they just blunder the pawn on d6. If they try to play this move, well, you can just continue with knight c3, knight d5, and c7. For example, king d8, knight goes there, and on the next move, you're threatening to play c7, c8, and capture the bishop for free. That's why queen d8, queen b7, king e8, and now the knight enters the enemy camp on the queen side. Knight c3, queen a5, knight b5. Queen e1 was a mistake here, but if, for example, black played a proper move like queen d8, it didn't help as well. Knight c7 check, king f7, knight e6, attacking the queen, queen e8, and then, for example, h4, improving the position move by move. This is where black is in a kind of a Zugzwang. There are no good moves that improve their position. In the game, they played queen e1 and queen c8 check. This is where black resigned. So why did they resign? First of all, if they block with the bishop, they lose the central pawn. If they move the king to f7, you can just continue with queen e6, king f8, and then take one pawn, threaten with a mate, so the bishop has to take, and then you capture the other pawn and successfully promote one of them. So here, together with the queen, the knight created much more combinations that bishop and queen can do together. In all other cases, the bishop is better. I can demonstrate it with this simple example. Look at the bishop. It's really good. The bishop is supporting the attack on the king side. And white continued with h5 in this position. Black replied with b4 to force the bishop to move to d2 and become a bad bishop. However, it's not the end. Because of the tactical opportunities of this position, white can keep the bishop on this diagonal. H takes g6, And if now they take the bishop after g takes f7, double check, white wins. For example, king h8 and just rook g8. So that's why here h takes g6, but now the rook enters the enemy camp, threatening with rook g6, king h7, and here this bishop participates in the attack with this rook. So queen c4, attracting the enemy queen, and if queen takes c4, it's rook to h1 and rook h8 on the next move. However, of course, black didn't capture on c4, they played f5, and white had to exchange the queens, but then continued the attack with rook and bishop. After that, they simply captured the rook here and successfully end with extra rook in this position. So, in most cases, the bishop is better, especially if it's located on the open diagonal. In this video, you learned in which cases a knight is better than a bishop, and when you'd better take the advantage of a bishop over the knight. If you believe your bishop and the enemy knight are approximately equal in a concrete situation and you decide to exchange them, please make sure you get any benefits after this exchange. For example, you gain a pawn, obtain initiative, or just improve your other pieces and occupy critical squares. Thank you for watching, and make sure to like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and share it with your friends, chess players, so they can learn when to exchange the bishop for the knight and when not. If you know any other examples, especially in the opening, when the knight can be better than a bishop, please share it into the comment section below this video. After watching this video, I'm sure you improved your ability to play positionally and take right decisions about pieces exchanges. However, if you would like to learn something new in chess and also improve your tactical vision, watch the video When to Sacrifice Pieces in Chess Strategy Advanced on the screen next, and I will see you there in a moment.